The word genetics is a very popular buzzword these days, especially if you're talking about human genetics or genetic engineering. In our society, human society, it's usually regarded as taboo to marry a close relative. Apart from any other consideration, any progeny which come from such a union has a much better chance of inborn deformities or other physical and mental weaknesses. Now, if that's true of human society, it's equally true of animals.
In order to conserve the once abundant wildlife of our country, man has proclaimed certain areas nature reserves and fenced them in. An excellent idea, you will say. But in doing so, isolated pockets of species have been created that could be vulnerable to inbreeding. These animals can remain healthy despite inbreeding if the founder population of the group is large enough. Just how large each population has to be, we don't know. Dr. Peter Taylor of the Natural Science Museum is doing genetic research on zebras with the Natal Parks Board and the University of Natal, which might throw new light on the matter. So far, they have taken blood samples of zebras from Umfolozi, with its population of 2,000, and Albert Falls, which has only 50 zebras, as well as Vernon Crooks, which has 110. They are testing the theory that a zebra population below 170 can create problems in the long term. Peter took me to the small Harold Johnson Reserve with its tiny population of 8 zebra to show me the type of problems being experienced with small genetic pools.
Peter, it's difficult not to believe that these are foals. I mean, they're absolutely minute compared to your average adult zebra.
That was my first impression. They very much look like sub-adults, but we know from their birth records that they're fully grown zebras. The indications from the small size and the quite pronounced reduced striping that there could be some loss of genetic variability through inbreeding.
When we compare the stripes of the Harold Johnson Reserve to those of zebra in Umfolozi, which are broad, dark, and sharply defined, the message is clear.
As part of the research, blood samples from the problem herd at the Harold Johnson Reserve will be compared with the control group at Umfolozi, from which the herd originally derived.
The control group will be used as a standard against which to measure genetic diversity. All the blood specimens are sent to Karen Bishop of the University of Natal for analysis. Karen is doing a master's degree in conservation genetics.
Basically, I'm using a relatively new technique called rapids. After isolating the DNA, I amplify certain random fragments of DNA. Then from that, I visualize it on a gel, visualize the amplification on a gel. You can see over here a banding pattern of individuals. These aren't zebra, but they still demonstrate the point. The fact that you can see here the banding pattern is reasonably similar. This will indicate that there is very little genetic diversity.
The results from these gels are put into a computer program which measures genetic diversity. Karen's analysis is the key to finding out just what the minimum size of a zebra herd should be. Judging from the condition of the zebra at the Harold Johnson Reserve, 8 is not enough.
People might ask, well, so what? There's so many zebra around. Why worry? Why bother? But that's not the point. It's the consequences, the long-term consequences for conservation among all wildlife. That's a priority concern. And the study of the zebra might well provide a meaningful long-term management strategy for many other species.
As a piece of research, its significance is apparent when one considers that nature reserves are unlikely to get any bigger. In fact, there is a growing trend towards the creation of numerous small private reserves.
After the break, Richard focuses on species that need large home ranges to survive.
Besides a potential inbreeding problem, smaller reserves also have other disadvantages. Some species, for instance, need big home ranges in order to survive. The wild dog is a good example. They mix their genes when individual animals move from one pack to another, which just isn't possible in a small reserve, or even one the size of Hlului umphalosi. Lions also need large areas to group themselves in prides, varying from 4 to 30 members. When the sub-adult males are about 3 years old, they are forced to leave their pride and set up their own territory. Nature's way of safeguarding against inbreeding. To hunt successfully and defend a territory, they will either have to join other lone males also evicted from their pride, or they will have to usurp the position of males in other prides, thereby bringing fresh new genes into the pride.
The problem arises when there's not enough space to cope for all the young male adults staking out their own territory. And that, of course, can be a result of the reserve not being big enough, or in fact that the lion population has been allowed to grow unchecked.
What happens then is that the young males will try to break through the fencing to create new territories. Conflict can develop when they kill cattle belonging to the park's neighbors. This happened in Umphalosi Game Reserve.
To address the problem, a number of sub-adult males were culled. Now, this could have encouraged inbreeding, as there were fewer young males with their fresh gene stock to challenge the older males in each pride.
To make matters worse, the original founder population of the Umphalosi lions was small.
Lions, which were once indigenous to this area, were exterminated from Zululand in 1938. And then, some 20 years later, a lone male spoor was sighted in what is now Umkhuze Game Reserve. The long and the short of the story is that at the present day, the Umphalosi lion population is showing a negative growth rate. And this is particularly worrying, especially when you consider that they are one of the more prolific breeders. Evidence has also shown that male lions have very low semen counts, consequently a low fertility rate.
The first warning sign that there may be an inbreeding problem came in a routine monitoring program in 1993, when the lions were counted and the numbers found to be far less than expected. Ecologist Dr. Anthony Maddock, who has been studying the lions at Umphalosi Hlului Game Reserve for some time, has since seen other worrying signs.
There seems to be a high mortality of cubs. Cubs are being born, and then not all of them are reaching sub-adulthood or adulthood. Some of the animals are exhibiting swellings on the joints, which have revealed some problems with certain protozoans. And there's also a low sperm count with some of the males. We haven't been able to get all of the males caught and samples taken from them, but some of the males have got low sperm counts. And all of these things seem to support the idea of a genetic problem, which is, as I say, the route that we're following at the moment.
Senior Ranger Frank Carlisle says the high parasite count in blood samples means that the lions could be suffering in a number of ways.
A compromised lion could be a sick lion, a lion that is unhealthy, that has been bitten by another lion and slowly has lost condition. But when you take blood from a lion that you call healthy and looks very healthy, and all of a sudden it's got a very high hepatozoa count, it is compromised in another way. And that form of it could be compromised in that it is an inbred lion.
The extremely emaciated condition of some of the Umphalosi lions is another indication of their poor state of health. As a result of all the observations, an intensive monitoring project has been started using call-ups. At these call-ups, lions are lured by broadcasting recorded sounds of animals at a kill, and then darted and examined. Bait is used to draw the lions to a set spot a few meters away from the caravan, in which a darting team take cover. The bait is chained to prevent the lions from pulling it away. A semicircle of thorn branches keeps the lions in one spot and makes it easier to dart them. It was some time before the lioness on this occasion settled down. Once darted, she had to be moved to a safer spot next to the caravan. Not easy when there are other lions lurking around. Keep going.
This is one of those proper hematomas that they get.
Except for the small swelling where the dart went in, she was fine.
Okay, so unfortunately on the other side, you might want to bring the camera around there. I can't really show you. But on this elbow, there's a little bit of tissue growth. I don't know what it is. It's not similar to the swellings that I was telling you about. The swellings I was talking about are a lot larger and have fluid in them. This definitely doesn't have any fluid in it. It could be the start of a swelling, but because I don't know anything about, no one knows anything about these sores, I can't say definitely yes or no. Okay.
The rest of the pride, mostly younger animals, hovered within 30 to 40 meters from us and had to be kept at bay while the examination was underway. Unlike the darted female, several of them had the familiar swellings on the joints that had been seen on so many of the other lions. What is causing them?
Up to now, no veterinary organisation in the country has been able to explain what it is. We are at the moment in the process of investigating it. It might not be linked to inbreeding, but we certainly are looking at it as one of the possibilities.
But it now seems that the link between the swellings and inbreeding is more than just a possibility. In fact, a report which has just been received from America, where the blood samples of the affected lions were sent for scientific analysis, has in fact confirmed that there is a lack of genetic variability in the lions as a result of inbreeding, which in fact leads us to the next question. If inbreeding, as the test proves, is the problem, what does the Natal Parks Board intend doing about it?
Are we going to leave it as it is and monitor it as an example of what happens in a population where there is an inbreeding that has been shown to occur, an inbreeding event, and what is the end result of that without any management intervention? That is one option. The other option is to try and go in and to change improve the genetic composition of these lions by bringing in other individuals. And what we've thought about doing there is to take the pride males from one or two prides and to remove those animals and bring in new genes in the form of large males from another area and put those animals in and hope that they would take over the prides and then bring in the genes in that way.
The Natal Parks Board are likely to opt for replacing the weaker males in the prides with younger, healthier males. At least in this way, they're going to try and correct the lack of genetic diversity in lions, which is not something you can do in all species, the cheetah being a classic example. The cheetah has almost genetically cloned itself over the years. In fact, as a species, long before man ever influenced its numbers, it formed a bottleneck So in fact, all the cheetahs you see today have descended from just a few individuals.
This is one of 2 cheetah that was brought in from Namibia to restock the Umfolozi Reserve, an area where they once occurred. They are being kept in a boma until they are acclimatized. The yellow tags make the fence more visible so that the animals don't injure themselves. It is hoped by bringing them into the reserve it will help to give the species a chance of survival. This is because a species, even with a small founder population like the cheetah, has shown that it can increase its numbers significantly if it is allowed to breed within a number of different areas. A good example of this is the white rhino. Their numbers dropped to 50 in the 1930s, but as a result of the Natal Parks Board's Operation Rhino, where they were shipped to reserves all over the world, their numbers are now well over 4,000. But where animals are moved from one reserve to another, there can be problems. Authorities are reluctant, for instance, to introduce buffaloes from other areas into the stock of Addo-type buffalo in the Pilanesberg, which are believed to have a genetic composition making them immune to foot and mouth disease and corridor fever. Likewise, lions from the Kruger National Park could bring with them feline AIDS if introduced into the Hluhluwe Umfolozi population. The only FIV-free lion population is in Namibia, but they have evolved to cope with a specific environmental condition, arid and in some places semi-desert. Would these lions survive and successfully mix with the Hluhluwe lions which have developed in response to the very different conditions in the east of the subcontinent? Dr. Anthony Boland, Natal Parks Board ecologist, says, risks aside, unless conservationists constantly bring in new genes by relocating animals to and from other reserves, many species could become extinct.
It's important, I think it's a fact, that in the future, with all our provincial conservation agencies, that you're going to have to look at some kind of manual or artificial migration between these populations to maintain their variability. I think a fault made by a lot of conservationists is you look at conserving in your lifetime. We should be looking at conserving a species, a population or a subpopulation in terms of 200, 1,000 years hence.
Game reserves have existed for little more than 100 years, a mere blink of the eye in evolutionary terms. Are we only now beginning to realize the impact of man's interference with nature in conserving animals within these reserves?
By confining wildlife to restricted areas, and often in small population groups, have we not somehow signed some long-term death knell to much of our wildlife species? Perhaps over the next 500 to 1,000 years. Indeed, will our descendants be able to see such things as lions, giraffes, rhinos, zebras?
And are some species already programmed for extinction in the years to come? Hopefully, the ongoing research in conservation genetics will provide not only the answers, but useful guidelines for future game management.
The research continues, but there is a problem. The Natal Parks Board needs funding to buy radio telemetry equipment, drugs for darting, and also to pay the salary of a permanent research assistant. Any offers out there? Please contact the Natal Parks Board head office in Pietermaritzburg. Die spook oor die voorgestelde staalfabriek by Saldanha Bay het nog lank nie gaan lê nie. Die fabriek het besliste voor- en nadele vir ons land, maar kan ons nou reeds sê wat die toekoms vir ons inhou? Dis die vraag wat Suzette net na die onderbreking gaan vra.
Dis Langebaan strandmeer, naby Saldanha aan die Weskus. 'n Gebied met 'n toerismepotensiaal wat Suid-Afrika, so sê die mense wat hier woon, nog nie naaste by benut nie. Nie ver van die vlei land af nie, wil Escor 'n staalfabriek ombou. Nou is daar mense wat nie net bang is die fabriek gaan skade doen hier in die baai nie. Hulle is eintlik meer bekommerd oor die invloed wat dit gaan hê op die gebied rondom Saldanha. Want wie weet hoeveel satellietnywerhede gaan hiernatoe gelok word. En wie kan sê hoe groot gaan die stroom werkers en werksoekers wees wat agter die werksgeleenthede aan hiernatoe gaan kom. Die strandmeer self word op 'n manier beskerm deur 'n internasionale konvensie oor vlei lande, die Ramsar-konvensie. Suid-Afrika is 'n ondertekenaar van die konvensie. Dit beteken dat ons beloof het om behoorlik te beplan voor enige ontwikkelings toegelaat word wat dalk so 'n vleilandstelsel kan bedreig. So daar is daarom iets wat ontwikkelaars hier in toom kan help hou. Maar skaars 30 km noord hiervandaan lê nog 'n groot vleilandstelsel. Een wat nog nie 'n Ramsar gebied is nie, die Bergriviermonding. Vir die laaste 40 tot 50 kilometer kronkel die Bergrivier al met die plat kusvlakte langs tot by die see. En in die proses vorm hy 'n reuse vlei landskap wat vir voelkundiges baie belangriker is as selfs die strandmeergebied by Saldanha. Nou hoekom hulle bekommerd is oor hierdie vlei land en Escor se planne by Saldanha, is omdat dit vars, goeie drinkwater is. En in ons waterarm land soek ontwikkelaars deesdae na plekke met genoeg vars water. Hier waar die rivierwater met die inkomende getyse seewater meng, kan 'n mens van drinkwater vergeet. Maar net 'n paar kilometer van die kus af is die water heerlik vars. Daar's min ander water in die geweste. Omtrent elke dorp kry sy drinkwater uit die Bergrivier. Maar geoloog van die departement waterwese sê hier is ook oorgenoeg vars grondwater, sommer 3 groot ondergrondse damme. Die 2 naaste aan die see is die grootste. Uit elkeen kan daar elke jaar byna 20 miljoen kiloliter water gehaal word, sonder dat dit die bron sal begin uitput. Die groot dammewater hier onder die dorre stuk aarde word, so sê hulle, volgehou net deur die normale reënval in die omgewing. En dis nie eers 400 mm per jaar nie. Die rivierwater kan vreemd genoeg glad nie by die grondwater uitkom nie, al lê die rivier byna bo op een van die bronne. Daar's glo ondeurdringbare rotslae in die pad. Dis iets waaraan party ekoloë moeilik sluk. Hulle is bang daar's wel 'n verbinding. En dit sou beteken dat van die fonteinwater eintlik maar uit die rivier kom. Op die oog af kan 'n mens miskien sê die streek het water en daar kan maar gebou word. Hier's mos plek vir nog 'n groot dorp vol mense op die stuk dorre aarde, tussen die Bergrivier en Saldanha daar agter die randjies in die verte. 'n Staalfabriek naby hierdie waterryke vlei land mag dalk op die oog af so onopsigtelik wees soos hierdie klein klippie, maar kyk nou wat gebeur as ek die klippie in die water gooi. Die rimpelings kring baie ver uit, né? Daar's oral in die wêreld voorbeelde van die feitelik katastrofiese rimpelings wat menslike groeipunte op sensitiewe vleilandstelsels veroorsaak. Seker die beste voorbeeld is Florida se Everglades in Amerika, een van die grootste vleilandstelsels op aarde. Een van die groot stede in die middel van wat eers net 'n reuse vleigebied was, is Orlando. 20 jaar gelede was dit net 'n plattelandse dorpie. Die grondpryse was laag want alles was onder water. Maar Walt Disney het 'n groot stuk grond kom koop en sy Disneyland gebou. Vandag is Disneyland wêreldbekend en Orlando een van die grootste stede in Florida. Dis 'n stad vol vlei landeilande. Hier moet enige natkoel volgens wet bewaar word. Maak nie saak waar dit is of hoe groot dit is nie. Die gevolg is sulke geïsoleerde groenpolle wat eintlik geen vleilande meer kan wees nie. Dis wat gebeur as die mens te veel vir homself vat, sê Ben Breedlove, 'n omgewingskonsultant van Orlando.
If you take a look at it, it's green, it's full of water, it looks pretty good. It's still a fragment. It's still not what we want to do. And the reason for it's pretty simple. There's some things you want a wetland to do. You want it to be large enough that it contains a minimum viable population, or it's part of a system where a minimum viable population is contained. And it's got to have opportunities for feeding, breeding, nesting, and resting. If you don't have those four things at the right time of the year, for each stage in the life cycle, you don't have habitat. You're frankly dealing with something that at that point in time is wasted, and there's not much you can do about it. This system needs to be part of something else.
En die something else lê aanderkant is die riele 6-laan snelweg wat die klein vleilandjies se lewensaar letterlik afsny. Om groot stukke grond vir menslike gebruik droog te lê, het die Amerikaners massiewe kanaalstelsels dwars oor die Everglades gebou. Die kanaal is maar een van vele wat Orlando se stadsgebied en die woonbuurte daar buite droog hou. Met die kanale langs vloei die water na groot damme toe. Of sommer na laer liggende dele van die Everglades wat in elk geval te nat is vir menslike gebruik. Die gevolge van die verandering in die vloeipatrone in die omgewing van stede maak meer en meer mense al hoe meer bekommerd. 'n Bietjie verder suid in Florida, net suid van Lake Okeechobee, is die afgelope 30 tot 40 jaar baie groot stukke grond drooggelê vir suikerplantasies. Dis die rooi gebied op die satellietfoto. Oral werk pompstasies dag en nag. Die droogmaakproses is nou al 'n bietjie langer aan die gang as byvoorbeeld in Orlando. En stroomaf, suid van die suikerplantasies, is groot stukke Everglades deesdae gereeld onder water, sê Tom Shirley. Hy woon en werk sy lewe lank al hier as bewaarder en wetstoepasser. Vir hom is die pompstasies 'n ewel, want dis hoe letterlik miljoene ekstra liters water elke dag in die natuurgebiede van die Everglades beland.